Welcome back to Power Platform PhD. Today we're going to continue our series on JSON by using the send an HTTP request to SharePoint to target some information in a list and return that JSON and see how we can target and delve into that data. See you at the desktop. Okay, here we are on my desktop. If you remember in the last video, we used Power Automate to create a CSV table that we then uploaded into SharePoint. And it ended up creating a CSV file here into the documents. Let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. Show it again. So there's our movies.csv. And here's the three titles from Friday the 13th. Now, if we go back into SharePoint, let's say we wanted to go ahead and create a list out of that. So one way to do that would just to be click on new, click on list, and we're going to go ahead and use that CSV file. So we're going to manually do this, or kind of manual, like we're going to say create from CSV. Let's see, we want this one, click on next. And then you have like the title, the number. These are all the things that are part of our stuff. And we could even change the data type. So if you wanted to go ahead and change this one to be like a choice, we could do that. Then you'd be able to select these choices between hunting knife, axe, machete. You'll see that in a second once we finish this up. And then single line of text is fine. And we'll just click on next. We'll just call this movies and create. Okay, so here we are. So this is our little SharePoint list. Again, if I click on this to edit, you can see that these weapons are a choice column. So we can take away, we can add. But yeah, let's do something a little bit better than this, a little bit more, not complex, but just want to show you something we can do with the list. So how about we do a request via HTTP using the APIs that are built into Power Automate to target this list. All right, so we're back at my desktop. Let me go ahead. Before we go into Power Automate and create this instant Cloudflow, I do want to take a second to look at the documentation. I'll paste these two links into the description. The first one is just the general overview of the whole API for SharePoint, the SharePoint REST API. There's a lot of information there, so depending on your use case, you have to delve into that and see what works for you. In this example, we're going to do is we're just going to get the list. Even in the default, when we go into the Power Automate and we create that action, it's going to show you this already for you. It gives you as an example, but I just wanted to show you in the documentation. It's pretty comprehensive. So there's a lot of things you can do with this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go to Power Automate and see how this actually works. So I'm going to click on Instant Cloudflow. We're going to call this Movies Demo. We'll manually trigger a flow and click on Create. Get some real estate up here. Click on the Add an Action. And if I type in SharePoint, it should be usually the first one. So SharePoint. We're looking for the HTTP one. So here we go. Send an HTTP request to SharePoint. That's exactly what we're looking for. As I mentioned before, if I first of all, let's get the site address that you're trying to go to. Let me explain that. And then also there's these different methods that you can use. So get, put, patch, delete, whatever. We're trying to get the information from the list. So we're going to use get. And then as I mentioned before, this is the example. It's API underscore API web list. That's the exact same thing that was in this thing here at the top. So you can just kind of eyeball it or copy and paste this, whatever. Ours is going to be movies. So let me go back into this and paste in our thing. So underscore API web list, get by title, movies. Okay, we're looking good. One last thing that you need to do is put in the header. So I'm going to say show all, but we're just going to put in the header. And I know it's kind of a pain to do this, but you just kind of have to remember what to do. So you want the accept header, and then you also want to make sure that we type in application, JSON, and then OData equals no metadata equals no metadata. After you do this enough, you're just going to remember what these are. Here, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, we've ran, so let's see what we have here. So let's go ahead and click on the show raw outputs, and you'll get a return of body and then a value key with an array of all the movies that we were trying to return. So for this thing, I'm going to go ahead and actually from the bottom of this array, let's go from here. Let's get all three of these and then go back into our JSON viewer and kind of look at this. Let me collapse these. Let's actually beautify it. Collapse. All right, so this is our key, and we have an array with 3 records in it. So if you want to look at the second one, you can see the ID is 2, the title is Friday the 13th Part 2. This is the weapons, etc., etc. So how we do this in terms of Power Automate, if we wanted to target it, this is kind of a review. We can do via compose or parse JSON. So let's go ahead and do a compose here real quick. Just to do a little bit of review. So again, if you want to target that body, we can do a couple things. One, we can go into the dynamic way and say, hey, look here, we want to get the body from this action, send an HTTP request. If I go ahead and click on that, actually, we'll just do that. And I mouse over it. You can see it uses the PowerFX, the function expression body. In fact, if you go to the code view, you can see it right here. So if I copy this, let's do another compose just to kind of show it the other way. And so in this one, if I click on the function expression and start typing in body, I can target it this way. I could also either do the function expression, kind of like the query notation or the dot notation. I'll go ahead and do dot. And let's say I wanted to do, well, we have to do value. And you might say, well, why do you have to do value? Let's go back in there. Value is the key. So we're trying to go to that key. So I'm sorry, that key value. Well, let's say we want to target the second one. So that's 1. And then let's say we wanted to target the weapons. So I want to show you something here, and we'll go back and look and see why this is the case. But if I go back and look at it, it doesn't say weapons. It says field 2. Field 1 for the year, field 2 for the weapons, field 3 for all the victims. After I run this, I'll go ahead and explain why that's the case and how we can avoid it. So let's go back to our thing here. I'm going to say dot field underscore 2. I'm going to add that function, and then let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So on our compose 1, where we were targeting that field underscore 2, we end up getting all the weapons back. And we can see that in our code view here. We're using the body function expression to target the send an HTTP request to SharePoint. We're hitting the value field, and in that field, it returns an array. So we're going for the second element and the field underscore 2. And in the original composer, we just drag dynamically the variable from the dynamic way. So you can see that again in the code view, it gave us just the original output for this right here. So if we click on it, look at the outputs, it returns with the value key and then this array of 3 objects. So let's talk a little bit about why these are saying field 1, field 2, et cetera, et cetera. So if you remember in our original video that we did before this, we had used a CSV table to then dynamically create this CSV file that we can then later on import into SharePoint. And we did this by clicking on new, say a new list. And then from here, we were able to go ahead and say root from a CSV file. And for some reason, I don't know why it does this, but it doesn't really map all the fields the way it's supposed to. There is a way to work around that, but first I'm going to try and explain why it does that. So if it does it this way and you do it where you're trying to dynamically pull it through the CSV file, it's going to do that field 1, field 2, field 3 thing. And you'll say, well, hey, did my list look like it says weapons, it says victims? And you're correct. So if I go ahead and go to, let's see, site contents, and we go to our movies list, you'll see that it does say title, year, weapons, victims. It's all the things that we were expecting. But if you really look into it and go to the list settings, it'll explain where you're getting that field 1 from. So if I go to list settings and I click on, let's say, the year, it does say year there. So, the column name is year, but really the internal name is field 1, if you see it up here. And if I go ahead and pick another one, so let's go back and we'll see that the weapons, it says weapons, and it says weapons here for the column name, but it's actually field 2. So if we go all the way back into our thing, you can see here's our field 2, field 1, field 3. And if you don't want to have to deal with this sort of issue, I'm just bringing it up because sometimes you might be dynamically creating a list. You don't remember if it was done through a CSV file or if you created the whole infrastructure beforehand. And that's really the workaround. If you create the list from scratch without having to import all the data, you can sort of bypass that issue. So I've created another list here just to kind of show you. Let's go home, site contents. And here's movies 2. And this is one that I did, again, using the same sort of thing, but I just created the structure first and then I imported the data. I didn't use the CSV file, so I had to manually import that data. So there's pros and cons for both ways to do that. But the difference is now if I go to these list settings and I click on, let's say, weapons, if I do it this way, I actually do get weapons as my internal name as well. So it just depends on how you want to do this. So like if you really like to have the pretty name and it's easier for you when you're doing your code to use your dot notation or whether it's the query way, it's like you want it. I like it where I actually see it where it says weapons or victims or whatever. It makes it more explicit. You know what you're talking about. Very down the road when you're seeing all these weird like what was field 3? I don't know what that is. You have to keep looking or whatever. So my suggestion would be just to build the list out without any data and then import the data in later. I hope that explains that. If you have any other questions or comments, just please leave a comment on that. What do you think about that, or what's your preference? This concludes our video on how to send an HTTP request to SharePoint. Stay tuned next week as we start a new series on Power Apps and how to do custom theming with custom components, SVG files, and optimization. See you then. Please click the like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.